Morning, everyone. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Today is Thursday, February the 5th. You can see overall markets continue to sell off towards the downside with some earnings, a bunch of tech selling off here as well. AMD down about 17%. So that was the big mover yesterday. We had a bunch of other names like Nvidia, Tesla towards the downside. Apple was actually continuing to show some strength. Yesterday, we also had some Google earnings in the after hours. So we'll kind of talk about that here in the game plan coming into today. But yeah, what's up, everyone? Hope you guys are doing well. Let's go on to the economic calendar. We'll head on to the charts here in a second. Actually, before we do that, what's up, everyone? Good morning. Good morning, TW, KO, Victor, Cody, Robert, Lamit, 50, Funny. What's up, Gerald, Sinna? Good morning, Robert, Andreas, Hartik, Big, Sweet, Gully, Stefan, Ashley, Sam, K, Cosmic. Good morning, Humming. Yeah, what's up, everyone? Hope you guys are doing well. Let's hop right into the economic calendar. Let me pull this up. And then we'll head on to the charts here. So for the economic calendar coming into today, let me actually just connect my keyboard. So coming into today, as you can see, we do have some more red folder news events. 8:30, we do have unemployment. And then at 10 a.m., we do have the JOLTS opening. President Trump speaking later into the day. And then, of course, tomorrow we have consumer sentiment, which is going to be at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As for the earnings calendar, we have some more earnings tonight, which is going to be Amazon. So we had Google in the after hours, and then Amazon is the big one tonight. Amazon's actually dropping towards the downside. We'll kind of talk about this here. Before we do that, let's hop on to the major indices. We'll start off on the futures, and then we'll make our way down. So first things first, overall markets, ES and Q, we're down about 5% off from our all-time highs. And a lot of these high beta names have dropped significantly. As you can see, some of these high beta names dropping like 30, 40%, whereas the overall market, we're actually not even that close from our all-time highs. As you can see, SPY, we're about 2% off our all-time highs. QQQ, we're down about 5% off our all-time highs, but it makes it seem like everything's crashing, right? A lot of these high beta names dropping significantly. Some of these tech names pulling back here as well. So those are the ones that are leading the markets towards the downside at least, but it seems like we're down a lot more than we actually are. So we'll kind of talk about what to expect moving forward here, specifically on the SPY and Qs, and then we'll of course go on to a bunch of these other tech names here in a second. But for the SPY, let's go back onto the ES and SPY first. Key levels that we have coming into today for the ES is just now going to be that previous day lows. So for the ES, we basically opened up in between its range yesterday. We ended up rejecting off one of our key levels that we have marked out, 69.60, and we ended up making our way towards the downside. Now for the ES moving forward, the key levels that we're going to have marked out, we're going to have two. We're going to have our previous day lows, and we're going to also have our last week's lows. So we have our 6,900 along with our 6870s. So for the ES coming into today, keep an eye out on your last week's lows if you do want to see continued downside, potential pop and fade here off that 6,900. Another scenario that we can be looking for now is going to be underneath our previous day lows, 6,870 for this continuation towards the downside. So two scenarios here for the ES. If you're looking at the Qs, and the NASDAQ is a lot weaker here, so that's why tech is selling off compared to the ES. But these are the two scenarios that we have for the ES coming to market open. You can see we're dropping here nicely right down in towards our key level of support. The only way we're going to be looking for any sort of mean reversion or any sort of potential long position back towards the highs is going to be right the reclaim back above our 6,900. That's going to be the only scenario here for some upside. So if the market does want to show a little bit of strength, right, we need to see that bounce off our previous day lows, and we'd like to see that reclaim back above our 6,900. If we go on to the SPY chart, the key levels that we have today are the exact same thing. What we have here is that last week's lows, 686, along with our 682. So these are the two levels that we have coming into market open. If you do want to see some continued downside, pop and fade here off our 685 for this push down in towards our 680 and below, or now of course going to be underneath that previous day lows for that continuation down in towards that 678. So we have a couple scenarios laid out here on the SPY chart coming into market open. Higher time frames, as you can see for this week, a nice drop towards the downside. Qs end up having a nicer drop, and now you can see in the pre-market we're dropping. So if we want to see continued downside here on the SPY chart, number one, we need to maintain underneath that 686 for a push lower, or now get underneath our previous day lows, 682 for continued downside. Only way the markets can see a potential mini mean reversion here is if number one, we bounce off the 682, and number two, we have to reclaim essentially back above our last week's lows for a potential push back up and towards our pre-market highs. So that's what we have for the SPY coming into market open. Now let's go on to the QQQ. You can see the Qs is a lot more weaker than the SPY. So if we go into the NQ chart, we end up having a nice push towards the downside this week. Our last week's lows is all the way back up and towards our 25,600. We're underneath major key levels here as well. And now the pre-market is also dropping. So for the NQ levels that we can have marked out, we can mark out our previous day lows here as well. So key levels coming into today is at 25,120. Other key levels is of course going to be that previous day lows. So coming into today, if we do want to see continued downside, really now I'd like to see it maintain underneath our previous day lows. So any sort of pop that we do have, I'd like to see it break back underneath for continuation lower, or right off the bat, we can see that previous day low retest for that continuation lower here as well. Technically, based off market structure, higher time frames, as long as you can maintain underneath our 25,120, you are going to maintain a bearish stance here in the market, at least coming into today here for the NASDAQ. As for the upside, only reclaim is in play would be back above our now pre-market highs, back above our key levels that we have marked out here as well. So kind of similar thing to the ES, it's going to have to reclaim back above key levels. But whenever now the tape is bearish, we much rather look for major pops to short towards the downside. So now let's go on to the QQQ chart here. What we can have marked out is that previous day lows. Let's actually just get rid of this. Key levels coming to today for the QQQ. What I'm going to have marked out is that previous day lows, along with essentially our pre-market highs here, 608. If you go on to the hourly chart, you can see nice kind of push towards the downside, end up breaking underneath key levels, which was of course our last week's lows, continued weakness towards the downside this week. Right after this pop here on Tuesday, this pop was on Monday, we end up having this nice sell-off towards the downside. Now for the QQQ, the key levels that we're going to have marked out is going to be that previous day lows, 602, along with our pre-market highs, which is going to be this 608. If you do want to see continued downside, as I mentioned, we have a couple scenarios to look for. Number one, break underneath our previous day lows, hold underneath our previous day lows for continuation. Another possible scenario here, bounce right off the bat, break back underneath for this continued push later into the session. Or of course, if we have that pop all the way up and towards that 608, we could be looking for the rejection here off our 608 for this continuation lower. So a couple scenarios for the QQQ coming into market open. As I mentioned, higher time frame is still weak now, right? Based off Tuesday's price action, based off yesterday's price action. Here in the pre-market, we're already dropping, so we like to see some sort of pop for this continuation lower, or now underneath that previous day lows for this push towards the downside here now as well. If we go back onto the 15-minute time frame, if you do want to see any sort of push higher, it's going to have strong buyers right off the bat, and we're going to have to reclaim back above this 607. Let's just kind of give a quick overview of what the higher time frames are looking at. So for the QQQ, as you can see right here, recently rejected off our all-time highs key levels. Now, as you can see, we're having this nice pullback here on the daily chart. If you're looking at this weekly chart here as well, we end up having this nice rejection here off our all-time highs. You can see every single dip so far has been bought up, right? Higher lows have been built. Now, potentially, we're trying to break underneath this higher low key pivot point. So if the weekly can close underneath, potentially now we can start shifting towards the downside. And the next key level that we have is going to be this 580 on this higher time frame chart. So coming into really this week and moving forward, as you can see, we're coming down into a key level support today, which is our 600 key psych level. If we cannot find any buyers whatsoever off this 600 key psych, next level all the way back down in towards that 580. So that is something to keep in mind here for the Qs. We are coming back down, as I mentioned, into this key level of support. So we would like to see either one, buyers step in for a push back up and towards our 608, or if we break underneath, now we can see this extended push towards the downside towards our 590 here and below. So this is what we have for the QQQ coming into today. Now let's head on to some of the semiconductors. We'll head on to some other names like gold and silver here in a second at the very end. But if you guys do have any charts, you guys can now drop them in the chat. If you guys are enjoying this so far, I appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below here as well. Okay. Let's go on to the SMH. So the SMH here is our semiconductor ETF. And as you can see, this is the first sign of a little bit of weakness, right? Higher time frames, as I mentioned, still very much intact, right? You'd think that the market is down a lot more than it actually is, right? SPY and Qs down about 5% on the Qs, 2% on the SPY. SMH is only down about 11% here. But you would think, just based off market sentiment right now and where it's currently at, that we're down a lot more in the markets. We have a couple high beta names, as I mentioned, down 30, 40%. But overall, right, the overall markets are still holding up very nicely. If you look at the VIX, we have a nice little spike here on the VIX as well, right back up in towards 20 here on the higher time frames. If we go back onto the SMH, as you can see, now we're just kind of come back into higher time frame key levels of resistance. And we like to see if any buyers step in. You can see so far, basically a little bit of buyers stepping in here off our 370. If we can bounce off our 370, we're just going to have this extended push right back towards the upside. Break underneath this 370, we can see a little bit of a bigger pullback. So for the key levels on SMH, what we can have marked out here, of course, is going to be that 375. So as you can see, there's a couple touches here. Some buyers stepped in here off that 375, which is now also our previous day lows. So for the SMH moving forward, at least coming into today after having this big push lower, what we like to see is a couple things. Number one, potential pop and fade down in towards our previous day lows. Another scenario here is now going to be underneath our previous day lows for this continued push towards the downside. So a couple scenarios for the SMH coming into market open, right? If you do want to see continued weakness, pop and fade are now underneath our previous day lows. This is a higher time frame key level. And as you can see, buyers stepped in off your key level yesterday, 374 nicely. Very much well could come back down, have this nice V-shaped recovery, and push all the way back up and towards our 376. So keep an eye out on the SMH. As I mentioned, still bullish here on the higher time frames. Of course, the momentum has slowed down here now, but now we'd like to see it just bounce off key levels of support. As for the IWM, similar kind of thesis here. Key levels for the IWM is our previous level of resistance. Now we like to see this level turn into support. So far, buyers are defending this level, which is our 258. So that's our key level coming into market open. As you can see, so far, buyers are stepping in. Stepped in here on Tuesday, stepped in here yesterday. If we break underneath, we can see this continue push towards the downside. So far, if we do bounce, we can see this nice mean reversion back up and towards our 263. So that's what we have for the IWM. So far, we are just consolidating. So we like to see the reaction off the top and low of the range here. Okay, now I'm going to head on to some of the tech names that we have coming into today. If you guys do have any charts or any tickers, you guys can now drop them in the chat. As for Tesla, Tesla ended up pushing finally towards the downside. We talked about this one yesterday. What we had was this flat bottom. So as you can see, after earnings, we're just kind of consolidating here. Every single pop has been shorted on Tesla. What we're looking for, break underneath, retest continuation, or looking for some sort of retest towards the downside to target these lows and potentially below. Tesla yesterday ended up having a super solid move, right? Once it broke underneath our previous day lows, as you can see, touch here, touch here, touch here. Nice kind of break and retest underneath our 414 for this continued push towards the downside. And now you can see Tesla dropping here in the pre-market as well. So for Tesla, what are the key levels moving forward? As you can see, hit our all-time highs, having a little bit of a pullback here. Now we're continuing to show weakness. Next level here on Tesla, down in towards our 380. So we can see this push down in towards our 380 coming into the rest of the week. That can be one of the targets that we can keep an eye out for on Tesla. So for Tesla, the main levels that we'll have marked out is all the way down in towards this 380. Let's go back onto the lower time frames here. So the key levels coming into today here for Tesla is going to be our previous day lows, which is our 400 key psych level. And then of course the higher time frame, the next higher time frame level is fairly far away, which is this 380, of course. So if we do want to see continued downside on Tesla coming to market open, pop and fade off our previous day lows for this continued push down in towards that 380. This one's in play today. Another possible scenario, if it bounces, we can see this rejection off our previous day close, and we could be looking for the break back underneath later into the session, or we could be looking for that rejection off our previous day close. So this is what we have here on Tesla coming into market open, pop and fade off that previous day lows, or of course the pop up and towards our previous day close for this push towards the downside here as well. So these are the few scenarios that we have marked out on Tesla coming into market open. We could also be looking for a mean reversion play. If it bounces right off the bat, reclaims back above our previous day lows, you can see this bounce back up and towards our previous day close. But I'll be a little bit more cautious, right? Tesla higher time frame just broke underneath key levels. Unless there's a lot of relative strength intraday, right? My main thesis is going to be looking for major pops to short back towards the lows. So this is what we have for Tesla coming into market open. As for the next charts that we have, let's go on to Nvidia. Let's go on to the higher time frames on this ticker. So if you go on to the daily chart, Nvidia is in a very, very interesting spot. So if you look at this on the weekly time frame, we end up having this nice push towards the upside. You can see we're kind of forming this head and shoulders here on the daily chart. And some sellers are stepping in fairly aggressively. So you can see higher time frame, relative weakness compared to the SMH. We're now going to come back down in towards our key level of support once again. So for Nvidia, if we can break underneath this 172, we can see some more downside here on the overall market. So for Nvidia, the key level here is of course going to be that 172. If we break underneath this key level, there is a good chance we have some more continued push all the way back towards the downside here. So Nvidia, very key level here. What we like to see is one of two things, right? The bounce, push back up and towards that 180 and potentially move back towards the upside. But if the higher time frames can close below, if we can show some continued weakness, we can see this bigger push down in towards that 164 and of course all the way back down in towards that 150. So the key levels moving forward here on Nvidia, let's go back onto the hourly chart. What we're going to have marked out here is of course going to be that 170. Let's just mark this out. And now the key levels coming into market open are primarily just going to be our previous day lows and that 170 key psych level. So for Nvidia, what we're going to have marked out here is going to be that previous low that we created here on Tuesday. Yesterday, you can see nice kind of bounce right off the bat, but once we broke back underneath, nice continuation lower. Now for Nvidia moving forward, what we like to see is going to be this 176.50. If we can reject off this 176.50, we can see this nice continue push down in towards that previous day lows here and below. Another possible scenario, of course, is going to be underneath that previous day lows for that continue push down in towards that 170 and potentially below here as well. So for Nvidia, this is what we have here on the higher time frames. As I mentioned, your 170.50 is a key level here. So if you want to look for a bounce play, the bounce is going to be off our 170.50. So the bounce, as I mentioned, is going to be off our higher time frame key point of interest. You like to see buyers step in off this level if you do want to see any sort of mean reversion back towards the upside. So this is what we have for Nvidia coming into today. As for AMD end up having earnings and we end up dropping nicely towards the downside. So for AMD, rejection off our all-time highs, earnings drop towards the downside. And now you can see we end up pushing all the way back in towards our key level of support, which I end up talking about here, which is our 200 key psych. AMD also has a gap from all the way from October of last year. So for AMD, we're in a very interesting spot here. We have a gap from earnings, and we also have a gap up all the way back from October. This was with OpenAI news. This was back from October. So there's two gaps on the charts, and right now we're at a key level of support. So what we're going to do is keep an eye out on the reaction that we have essentially right here, right off that 200 key psych. So for AMD, this will be one of our main watches coming into market open, since there's two gaps here on the chart. What we're going to keep an eye out on is that previous day lows. If we do want to see continued downside, break underneath our previous day lows, hold underneath our previous day lows for a push towards the lows. This can be in play today here on AMD. We can keep an eye out on this one, right? The day after earnings, the 2 days after earnings. So day two potential play here towards the downside on AMD. If we want to see some upside, right, it would just be a mean reversion bounce, right? Just basing off higher time frames. If we can reclaim, show some strength right off the bat, potentially you could be looking for a mean reversion here on AMD. I don't really like this as much, but you could be looking for a 50% retracement. A potential bounce back up and towards our 210 is in play. So strong buyers step in right off the bat. You can keep an eye out on AMD for a push up and towards our pre-market highs and potentially our 210. But if we do show some continued weakness, keep an eye out on AMD underneath this 192. So this is what we have for this ticker coming into market open. Going to be one of my main watches just because we had earnings yesterday. And then we also have, right, higher time frame key level of support. If we break underneath, we can see a room all the way down in towards 180 and below. If we bounce, we can see this nice potential kind of bounce off our key level support. So keep an eye out on AMD coming into market open. Now let's go on to Apple. So Apple is the ticker that we mentioned, higher time frame relative strength, reclaim back above key levels. Hopefully some of you guys were able to capture Apple yesterday towards the upside. After earnings, super solid. We kind of talked about it on Tuesday. We talked about it earlier into this week. Apple, really nice push towards the upside after it broke above this consolidation period. And now we're already back at our 278. So Apple, super solid move towards the upside. Key levels that we have marked out now, of course, is going to be that 277, which is a higher time frame key pivot point, and we can also mark that off as our previous day highs general area here as well. So for Apple, let's just mark out this general area. We can drag it over. So coming into market open here for Apple, what we like to see now for some continued upside is a couple scenarios. Number one, opening range, we could be looking for this continued push up and towards our previous day highs. Another scenario, of course, now is going to be above our previous day highs for this continued push towards the upside here as well. So a couple scenarios for Apple. Of course, if it breaks underneath, you could be looking for the bounce play as well off our 272, which happens to be our Tuesday's highs. So a couple scenarios here for Apple. This is really one of the only tickers that is somewhat holding up as the market is dropping. So if you do want to see, so if the market does bounce, we can still keep an eye out on Apple for a continued pushback towards the upside. As for Google, this one recently had earnings. Let's talk about this one here as well. So for Google, key levels that we have marked out, really the only levels that matter now is going to be that earnings high, 346. And now we can basically mark out our earnings low and basically this 320. So if you go into the daily chart here on Google, not really too much is going on. As you can see, we were recently at all-time highs. We just had earnings here, and now we're pushing towards the downside. The key levels that we have marked out on Google that I'm actually going to mark out here now is going to be basically this level, this low right here, 318. You can see earnings low, multiple touches from back here. We have a little bit of a touch in the pre-market as well. So for Google, you want to be a little bit more cautious today, right? Day one earnings, not really a clear direction, only down about 4% today. Very much well could have a potential earnings reversal coming to market open. So I'd be very cautious. Both sides here are going to get IV crushed. As for Google, if you do want to see a potential bounce, right, bounce play above our 318 for continuation or earnings reversal or above now your 328. Only way for downside, of course, is going to be underneath that 318. Okay, there's a couple more names that we still have to go over. We just had some unemployment here as well. Let's check out the numbers. All right, we recently just had unemployment here as well at 8:30. Forecasted 212, actual 231, so came in a little bit higher than expected. As you can see, for the overall markets, we're just right at your previous day low. So we'll kind of talk about this here in a second. Go over the game plan. Microsoft continue to show weakness. I actually like this one for a full gap fill. So Microsoft, one of my main watches coming into today. As you can see, earnings last week, every pop so far being shorted. Microsoft underneath now are 410. Now it's going to be that previous day lows for that continued push down in towards our full gap fill on the higher time frames. We have our 400 key psych, we have our 394 here as well. So potential pop and fade on Microsoft is in play. As for Meta, this one recently filled our earnings gap towards the downside as well. So that was a nice potential trading opportunity for that full gap fill. Nice kind of mean reversion here, rejection off that 715. Now for Meta, key levels that we have marked out is going to be that full earnings low. The key levels moving forward is going to be that previous day lows. And we have that full earnings low. So if we do want to see continued downside here now on Meta, we like to see the rejection here off our 670 for any sort of continued push towards the downside. Amazon, we have earnings tonight. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But Amazon does have earnings after close. And then as for Netflix, you can see this one really just been continuing lower. As you can see on the higher time frames, not really too much to talk about. I guess it has not hit my drawings. So as you can see for Netflix, this one's just been continuing lower here. Key levels that we have marked out is, of course, our 84 key psych level. No buyers are stepping in so far. If you do want to see any sort of potential pushback towards the upside, the reclaim back above our 8250 is going to be key here. Okay. Now let's go on to a few of these tech names here and these high beta names. So if you guys do have any charts or any tickers, you guys can now drop them in the chat. If you guys are enjoying this so far, I appreciate if you guys drop a like. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that of course is in the description below here as well. As for Palantir, so Palantir, one of the names, we recently had earnings, bounced off a key level support, but the overall market staying heavy. We end up having this nice earnings reversal. One of our main watches yesterday for a potential earnings reversal. So for Palantir, we ended up rejecting. What we had here was our previous day lows. I talked about this yesterday. If you can see the break underneath, you can see this earnings reversal here on Palantir. And you can see within the first 5 minutes of market open, we also had a 5-minute opening range break, full earnings reversal, plus a bunch of continued push, a bunch of sellers stepping in. And now we're also breaking underneath our higher time frame key level of support, as you can see, which is essentially this general area here, our 144. So moving forward, Palantir, rejection off 144. We can see this continue push down in towards that 116 here on the higher time frames. So if you go into Palantir coming into market open, key levels that I have marked out, 144. And we also can have marked out now, it's going to be this previous day lows, which is going to be this 136. So if we do want to see continued downside now on Palantir, we need to see the rejection off 136 for continuation lower. Another possible scenario is going to be the rejection off essentially this 144 higher time frame key level for this continuation lower here as well. We can actually just mark this out and we can drag this over, right? I'm just going to mark out this 15-minute order block, and I'm just going to drag this over. One pretty big level, but higher time frame, 142 rejection, are now, as I mentioned, underneath our previous day lows for this continued push towards the downside. So that's what we have for Palantir. As for MU, a couple of these semiconductors pulling back here as well. So as you can see, MU, nice push towards the upside. Overall, semiconductors pulling back here just a little bit. Broke underneath our previous day lows nicely. So for MU, nice previous day low retest that we had here. As I mentioned, key level was at 408. Nice break underneath. Retest continuation towards the downside. Now the key level, similar thing. Previous day lows have this marked out. If you do want to see continued downside now, we like to see it underneath our previous day lows for a continuation lower. Another possible scenario, kind of this pop and fade for a push down in towards that previous day low here as well. So this is what we have for MU. A couple of these names, right? If you do want to see a mean reversion or potential bounce, we just like to see the bounce play off our 366, right? I don't expect a full V-shaped recovery, but if we do want to see a bounce in the markets, right, keep an eye out on your previous day lows. If you do want to see any sort of bounce back up and towards, let's say, our pre-market highs and potentially our after hours highs. As for TSM, a couple of these ones dropping. Intel still holding up compared to the overall market. So we'll keep an eye out on this one moving forward. So when the market does eventually bounce, we'll keep an eye out on Intel above 50 for this continuation higher. As for a few other tickers, SNDK, as you can see, this one's starting to slowly push towards the downside here as well. Key levels for SNDK that we have marked out was this 670. Nice kind of rejections off our 670, broke back underneath that 620. Now the key level here on SNDK, of course, is going to be that 540. So what we like to see here on SNDK, of course, is going to be that rejection that we have off our 580 coming into market open. Rejection off that 580. We can see this push down in towards that 540. If you do want to see any sort of potential mean reversion, reclaim back above our previous day lows for this push back up and towards that 620. As for the rest of the names, you can see a pretty big drop here in the markets, right? Hood dropping towards the downside, right? SoFi dropping here as well now, which is expected, of course, if these names have relative weakness and if the overall market starts dropping, these are going to be the ones that unwind the most since, of course, they were up the most. So now they're just coming back for a 50% retracement, 61.8 potentially on the higher time frames. Now let's go on to a few other tickers. Let's go on to gold and silver. As you can see for gold and silver here, these ones are still holding up nicely. Gold bounced off that key level that we talked about. Now you can see for gold, kind of just the reactions that we have off this 5,000 key psych, broke above, broke back underneath, couple reactions around this general area. Now we're rejecting off this level. So if we do want to see continued upside here now on gold, reclaim back above our 5,000 key psych level is in play. As for silver, this one showing a little bit more weakness compared to gold. And now it's right back at our key level of support, kind of rejected off our key levels yesterday as well. And a pretty sharp drop right down in towards our key level of support. So for silver, what we like to see is buyers step in for this mean reversion back up and towards our 84. If we want to see some continued downside, we like to see this pop and fade. Or now, as I mentioned, underneath our key lows, which as you can see is going to be that key level support towards the downside. So that's what we have coming into market open. Now let's go over the game plan that I have coming into today, and then I'm going to get ready for market open here. So SPY and Qs. What's the game plan coming into market open? The game plan is if we maintain underneath our last week's lows here, which is that 686 here on the SPY, I'm going to have a bearish stance here in the overall market, right? A pop and fade for continuation lower, or now it's going to be underneath our previous day lows for continuation lower here as well. The only way I'm going to be a little bit more neutral or potentially flip back bullish is if we can break back above within the first 5 to 15 minutes, right? If the first 5 to 15 minutes shows a lot of buyers stepping in, then potentially we can keep an eye out on a mean reversion in the market and look for this kind of continued pushback towards the highs. But that's only if a lot of buyers step in right off the bat and we can get above this 685. Besides that, I'd much rather look for pop and fades for continuation lower. As for the Qs, my key line in the sand is going to be this 608. If we maintain underneath 608, I'm going to maintain a bearish stance here in the market. Another scenario underneath our previous day lows, we can see this continue push towards the downside. Only way I'm bullish here on the Qs is if we had strong buyers right off the bat, or of course, if we can get back above this 608. My main watch is coming into market open. Keep an eye out on Tesla. Key levels that we have room down in towards that 380 and below. So for Tesla coming to market open, this one's showing some weakness. We're underneath our previous day lows. Keep an eye out on Tesla. Previous day low retest for this continuation down in towards 390s and potentially below here. So let's keep an eye out on Tesla underneath that previous day lows coming to market open. Nvidia, similar thesis. This one has room towards the downside here as well. Pop and fade off that Tuesday's lows for continuation towards the downside. Or now, of course, now underneath that previous day lows for a push lower. AMD, I'm open to playing both sides here on AMD. Of course, we just had some bearish earnings. We're down about 17%. So I do expect a little bit of a bounce here on AMD coming into market open. But so far, the tape is just very, very bearish. If we break underneath this key level support here on AMD, the next level all the way back down in towards 185 and this 170. So that's not out the picture here on AMD. So AMD also going to keep an eye out on this one today. Just because higher time frames, we had some earnings, really big push down towards the downside yesterday. Keep an eye out on your previous day lows. If we reject, we can see this continue push towards the downside. If we can reclaim, potentially you can see this push pre-market highs, and we can see this 208, which is just going to be this up close candle in this order block. So that's going to be the key level for AMD coming to market open. Apple continued upside here if the market does want to bounce, since the higher time frames has been fairly bullish ever since we had earnings, reclaim back above a key level. Google had earnings, not going to touch this one today. Microsoft, I do like this one for this full gap fill here as well. So you can keep an eye out on Microsoft underneath our previous day lows for that full gap fill here on the daily chart. As for a few other tickers, Meta, key level is going to be that previous day lows. Already filled one of its main objectives. So for Meta, just keep an eye out on your previous day lows. Amazon has earnings tonight, so I'll be a little bit more hands off on that one. As for the rest of the tickers here, right, Palantir has been showing weakness. You can keep an eye out on your previous day lows on this ticker for continued downside. And a couple of these semiconductors, of course, are pulling back here as well. So kind of similar game plan to yesterday. There's a lot of things to look out on the higher time frames, but at least for my main watches today, I'm going to keep an eye out on Tesla, Nvidia, and AMD, of course. And then for Apple, if the market does want to bounce, we'll keep an eye out on that one for a potential move back towards the upside. So that is going to be it for me today. There's a lot of things to go over today, so I probably missed some questions and some things in the chat. But yeah, that's going to be it for me today. I'm going to get ready for market open here now. If you guys did enjoy that, appreciate if you guys drop a like and sub. If you guys haven't joined the free daily watch list, that one, of course, is in the description below. Do I still watch the 5 and 50? Yeah, I take a look at those every day. Right, currently, right now, we're in the pre-market, so we can't mark out the 5 and 15-minute opening ranges. So that's just based off of intraday price action. Right now, currently, we're marking off our higher time frame charts. Yeah, that's going to be, let's go over a couple more names. Yeah, AVGO, this one had some earnings, I guess it did not have earnings, but kind of bounced right at a key level support, also filled that full earnings gap that we created. So you can see a little bit of buyers stepping in. It's going to want to see the reclaim back above if you want to see any sort of push higher. But yeah, that's going to be it for me today. I'm going to get ready for market open here now, and I will see you guys all tomorrow. All right, take care, everyone. Peace.